Ante Parishtakataye Haraye Namaste.
Ante Parishtakataye Haraye Namaste.
Hansaya Dara Narilaya Nirakshakaya Krishnaya Vishnaya Sase Nirupakramaya
Krishnaya Vishnaya Sase Nirupakramaya
Satsangrahaya Bhavapanta Nirashramapha
Satsangrahaya Bhavapanta Nijashramapta
Ante Parishtakataye Haraye Namaste.
Ante Parishtakataye Haraye Namaste. Hansaya Tara Nilayaya Nirikshakaya
Hansaya Dara Nilayaya Nirikshakaya
Krishnaya Mrishtaya Shase Nirupakramaya
Krishnaya Vishnu Sase Nirupakramaya
Satsangrahaya Bhavapanta Nijashramapta
Satsangrahaya Bhavapanta Nijashramapha
Ante Parishtakataye Haraye Namaste.
Ante Parishtakataye Haraye Namaste.
Hansaya Dara Nilayaya Nirakshakaya
Hansaya Tara Nilayaya Nirikshakaya
Krishnaya Nishtayasase Nirupakramaya
Krishnaya Mrishtaya Shase Nirupakramaya
Satsangrahaya Bhavapanta Nirishmata
Sansagrahaya Prabhapanta Nirashmapa
Ante Parishtakataye Haraye Namaste.
Ante Parishtakataye Haraye Namaste.
Hansaya
Hansaya
unto the most exalted and pure.
unto the most exalted and pure.
Pavitram Paramam,
Pavitram Paramam,
the supreme pure.
the supreme pure.
Dara,
Dara,
in the core of the heart.
in the core of the heart.
Nilayaya,
Nilayaya,
whose abode.
whose abode.
Nirikshakaya,
Nirikshakaya,
supervising the activities of the individual soul.
supervising the activities of the individual soul.
Krishnaya,
Krishnaya,
unto the supersoul who is a partial manifestation of Krishna.
unto the super soul who is a partial manifestation of Krishna.
Vishnu Yashase,
Vrishta Yashase,
whose reputation is very bright.
whose reputation is very bright.
Nirupakramaya,
Nirupakramaya,
who has no beginning.
who has no beginning.
Satsangrahaya,
Satsangrahaya,
understood only by pure devotees.
understood only by pure devotees.
Bhavapantanija ashrama apto,
Bhavapantanija ashrama bhapto,
being obtainment of the shelter of Krishna for persons within this material world.
being obtainment of the shelter of Krishna for persons within this material world.
Ante,
Ante,
at the ultimate end.
at the ultimate end.
Rishtagataye,
Varishthagataye,
unto him who is the ultimate goal,
unto him who is the ultimate goal,
the highest success of life.
the highest success of life.
Hariye,
Hariye,
unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
Namaha,
Namaha,
respectful obeisances.
respectful obeisances.
Hey. Oh, translation. O Lord, O Supreme Lord, you live within the core of everyone's heart and observe all the desires and activities of the conditioned souls. O Supreme Personality of Godhead, known as Krishna. Your reputation is bright and illuminating. You have no beginning, but you are the beginning of everything. This is understood by pure devotees. But you are easily accessible to the pure and truthful. When the conditioned souls are liberated and sheltered at your lotus feet after roving throughout the material world for many millions of years, they attain the highest success of life. Therefore, O Lord, O Supreme Personality of God, we offer our respectful obeisances at your feet. So responsively, please. O Lord, O Supreme Pure, you live within the core of everyone's heart and observe all the desires and activities of the conditioned souls. O Supreme Personality of Godhead, known as Lord Krishna, your reputation is bright and illuminating. You have no beginning, for you are the beginning of everything. This is understood by pure devotees, because you are easily accessible to the pure and truthful. When the conditioned souls are liberated and sheltered at your lotus feet, after roving throughout the material world for many millions of years, they attain the highest success of life. Therefore, O Lord, O Supreme Personality of Godhead, we offer our respectful obeisances at your lotus feet. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. The demigods certainly wanted Lord Vishnu to relieve their anxiety, but now they directly approach Lord Krishna. For although there is no difference between Lord Krishna and Lord Vishnu, Krishna descends to this planet in his Vasudeva feature for the purpose of Patranaya Sadhunam Vinashya Chaduskritam, protecting his devotees and annihilating the miscreants. Demons or atheists always disturb the demigods or devotees, and therefore Krishna descends to punish the atheists and demons and fulfill the desire of his devotees. Krishna, being the original cause of everything, is the Supreme Person. Above even Vishnu and Narayan, although there is no difference between these different forms of the Lord, as explained in Brahma Samhita, Dipacha eva hiyadashantaram abhyupecha dipayate vivrita hetu samanadama yas tadrigeva hicha vishnutaya vibhati Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami. Krishna expands himself as Vishnu the way a bright candle kindles another. Although there is no difference between the power of one candle and another, Krishna is compared to the original candle. The word Mrishna Yashase is significant here because Krishna is always famous for relieving his devotees from danger. A devotee who has sacrificed everything for the service of the Lord, for the service of Krishna, and whose only source of relief is the Lord, is known as a Kinchana. As expressed in the prayers offered by Queen Kunti, the Lord is a Kinchana Vita, the property of such a devotee. Those who are liberated from the bondage of conditioned life are elevated to the spiritual world where they achieve 5 kinds of liberation: Sayuja, Salokya, Sarupya, Sasti, and Samipya. They personally associate with the Lord in 5 mellows: Shantadasya, Sakya, Vatsalya, and Madhurya. These rasas are all emanations from Krishna. As described by Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur, the original mellow, Adi Ras, is conjugal love. Krishna is the origin of pure and spiritual conjugal love. Om Jnana Timiranda Shagananyana Shalakaya Chaksharan Malikam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Shri Advaita Gadadha Shri Vasadi Gaurabhaktarinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Gaura Hari. Is it too quiet, yeah? I heard that this morning when they were getting the CD on for Srila Prabhupada. Something got switched on that didn't need to be switched on. It could be that one of the switches on the white, where all the plugs go, that white thing, maybe one of those need to be switched off. Is the CD switch still on? No, on the white thing, where the plugs are? No. It's gone now, but that's because you turned the volume down. Eh? Oh. Well, we can skip the microphone then. Oh. Is anybody online? Who is? Your mom. Oh, Haribol, Andrea. Can you hear me okay? Just nod. Just make the camera nod. Okay, so Raghunath asked me to give class, so apologies that it's me again. And he said it's a really nice verse. I think he was looking forward to giving the class himself, you know. Sometimes Prabhupada Prana gives it, but he's a little bit sick right now. Any questions about that? It's a nice verse. Basically, you live within the core of the heart and observe the desires, and you have no beginning. That's interesting, isn't it? Because you're the beginning of everything. It's generally very hard to understand how something doesn't have a beginning. That's the special category we reserve for God. If the beginning is a big bang, then obviously the question is where did the little piece of whatever it was come from? It's always the question, isn't it? If it does come from a big bang, everything was exploded from a big bang, then the question is, well, where did it come from? Where did the law of gravity come from? And then they say, well, it was just always there. So that's what we say about God. Because if you think about it, something had to always be there for it to be there now, because nothing comes out of nothing. So anything that's here now must have always been here. Maybe not in this form. Krishna says there is no endurance of that which is temporary, and there's no cessation of that which is permanent. And that's the challenge, isn't it? What is permanent and what is temporary? Is everything temporary? Even if everything is temporary, still, where did the temporary thing come from in the first place? Still, you have to come up with this. Well, it was just always there. Or you have to explain how something came out of nothing, which is like explaining how the magician pulls a rabbit out of the hat, because it's like a magical thing, isn't it? Anyone struggling with that? Krishna has no beginning, he's just always been there.
Yeah, is this something that somebody could ever really fully understand, or is it just one of the things that we have to accept?
Well, the word understand is interesting, because there's understand and there's stand under. So if you're trying to understand something in spiritual life, you have to stand under it. You have to take shelter of it. It's like looking at Govardhan Hill and saying, I don't really understand why people are running underneath that hill. Krishna's going to drop it. And then when you stand under it, then you think, oh, right, he's not going to drop it. It's like a little puff of cotton on his finger. But you may not see that from a distance. You may just see people running under a mountain that's kind of shaking a little bit and think, oh, it looks a bit dodgy. I think I'll take my chances with my umbrella from sports shop. So the only way you understand is by standing under. Then it's revealed. I remember when I was a kid, I was asking my mum, how do you move your eyes? I was only about 2 years old. So she went like this. And as a little kid with a childish mind, I thought, well, that wasn't what I was expecting. I wanted like some more kind of technical. But she kind of just went like that. And I thought, well, that's right, yeah. That's how you move your eyes. And so that satisfied me. So because Krishna can speak everyone's language, not only different species, he also speaks every individual person's language, because you have an individual identity that you were created with and an original form that you were created with. So Krishna knows exactly what it is that you need to hear from him, to be able to understand him. But here's the thing, which is really interesting. This came up yesterday, I think, or the day before when I was giving classes. Your ability to understand is enhanced by your level of affection for what it is you're trying to understand. So that's interesting, because generally when we talk about a scientific experiment, we don't say pick up the test tube with love, hold the test tube and caress it lovingly, and now take the chemical compound and lovingly pour it into the test tube. It's not really considered scientific, is it? To do something lovingly. But when we're approaching the absolute truth, our ability to understand will be directly in proportion to how lovingly we approach the absolute truth as to whether it will be revealed to us. I mean, there are a lot of things actually which go on that we don't understand if you think about it. We don't really understand what love is in the first place, is it? That you suddenly feel this this selfless, intense desire to want to protect and give that person pleasure at the expense of your own safety and your own pleasure, because you get a greater pleasure in seeing that person being enjoying pleasure. So that doesn't make sense in a scientific sense. Doesn't really make sense. Why would you put yourself? We're all here because we're survival of the fittest. You would think the edge to survive would be stronger than the edge to love, but the edge to love overrides. A mother will step in front of a bullet to save her child. That doesn't make sense. Why are you doing that? So how do we understand love? How do we understand that? We only understand love by experiencing it. It really doesn't make sense if you write it down on a piece of paper and present it to someone. Of course, they could say, well, love's just a chemical composition and we can inject it in people and then they just become very loving to everything, you know. But when that wears off, then they become as much less loving as they were more loving when they were on it, because then the scales have to rebalance. The pound of flesh has to be paid one way or the other. You either pay for the pound of flesh by doing it in reality, or you pay the pound of flesh by doing it in illusion. But you still have to pay the pound of flesh. So how do we understand that we understand something? Sometimes we think we understood somebody, we knew them, and then we think, well, actually, maybe I don't really know them at all. Or maybe I thought I understood this, but actually I don't understand it at all. Which is generally the process of growing up, isn't it? When you're a young kid, you think you understand everything, and you think your parents don't know anything. And then you grow up, and you get the karma of having a kid that does the same to you. And so it goes on ad infinitum, nobody learning from anybody else. But if we can learn to hear, then we can learn to understand. Interesting, eh? Your ability to understand is enhanced by how much affection you have. If you're hearing with affection, your ability to understand will be enhanced. So that's interesting. But in one sense, it's inconceivable. So how can you understand that something has always existed? And how can you understand that you exist? I mean, the fact that you exist is inconceivable, especially when you don't know where you came from, other than your mum and dad, and where they came from, their mum and dad, and where did they come from, their mum and dad. But sooner or later, there's no more mums and dads left. And it's just this guy with, where's your mum and dad? I don't know. I just popped up on a lotus flower. I guess there's flowers, my mum and dad. So the only way Brahma could understand was he engaged in tapa, austerity, and then Krishna revealed everything to him. And then he was able to go ahead and create. So welcome to the, we've just read a translation, which you're probably reading right now. And we're discussing, you have no beginning, for you are the beginning of everything. So the Bhagavatam gives a very clear understanding, first of all, of when we're talking about God, what that entails, you know. So there was a question asked once to a rabbi. He was like a famous teacher. How do how come bad things happen to good people? So his conclusion was erroneous, because his conclusion was God's really good. He said either God's good or he's all powerful, but he can't be all good and all powerful, because then if he was, bad things wouldn't be happening to good people. So his conclusion was God is all good, but he's not all powerful. He's like a kind of bumbling Santa Claus. You know, he wants to give everybody a present, but sometimes he trips over a cloud and the thunderbolt comes down and the cat gets squashed under a steamroller or something like that, you know. He makes some mistake. So that's actually, the Bhagavatam is explaining very clearly that God is fully aware, fully cognizant of everything that's going on, past, present, and future. He is in full control, and things happen according to the living entity's attitude and a series of events that the living entity enacts, which results in a series of reactions, which results sometimes in very unpleasant things happening for that living entity to learn that it's not good to steal, that it's not good to kill, that it's not good to have infidelity, all the things that are not good. There's a reaction to teach them, you know. It's not good to put your hand in the fire, but I want to put it in anyway. Okay, then we have to burn your hand. So you can't blame the clockmaker when the clock doesn't work properly because you just rammed a screwdriver through the face of the clock. Say, oh, look, the clock's really wonky now. Must be a bad clockmaker. Clockmakers, look, I made the clock perfect, but nobody told you to put a screwdriver through the face. Of course there's going to be problems now. So that's the powerful. You are the beginning of everything, and therefore you have no beginning. And then we also have to learn that for ourselves also, that we have no beginning other than Krishna. And also Krishna, they say that as soon as there's the sun, then automatically there's sunlight, because sun doesn't mean anything without sunlight. So you could say technically, thank you, that there was a point where there was the sun and there was no sunlight because the sunlight is emanating from the sun. But at the same time, how is it possible for there to be a sun without the sunlight? So they're existing simultaneously. And Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you. So that's interesting as well, that Krishna is the source of us, but because he's beyond time, then also our origin is beyond time. So there was never a time, never a material dimension that could be used to measure the existence of the soul, which is interesting. So we may think, well, I realize now that I don't have that understanding, but I also realize that I would like to have that understanding. And if we associate with those and we pick up that they do have that understanding, like with Srila Prabhupada, when he would say something, by his conviction, the devotees realized it was true because of his conviction in saying it, you know. So as we become more realized, then we have more ability to convince others. If we're not convinced ourselves, then we have to work on ourselves. And it is self-realization. It's not somebody else realization. So if you realize, I could really be doing with this realization, it would be really, really helpful, then that's you on the road to achieving that realization. And what a wonderful day it'll be when you do realize that Krishna is the beginning of everything, beginning of you, the origin of you. So there you go. That's he is beyond our ability to understand. He's called Adhoksaja because it means beyond the ability to understand. You're the beginning of everything, but it is only understood by pure devotees. And you are easily accessible to the pure and the truthful. When the conditioned souls are liberated and sheltered at your lotus feet after roving throughout the material world, So here's a question. Sometimes we read things like we have to be more tolerant than a tree. And Mahatma Prabhu was saying that the word can also be translated as forgiving. Tolerant can be translated as forgiving. So what's another word that could be used to translate truthful? If a person's very truthful, what does that also indicate? Person's very truthful. There's quite a few things it would indicate, but any would be fine. Any or every one would be fine.
Humble.
Humble, yeah, I was thinking humble. Why humble?
Well, you have to be truthful to be humble because it means you understand your position.
Maybe your position is your God's gift to your fellow man. Maybe you think that. Well, in the truest sense of truth, not your idea of what the truth is. If you're fully aware of it, it's like when the astronauts, the Russian astronauts, went up into space, and they saw how small they were. Because you can imagine, you've been out sometimes at night when there's no lights around. If you're right out in the dense thick of nature, and there's no atmospheric glow, and you can directly see, then the whole sky is so full of stars that it looks like you could just touch them. They look so near, and there's so many of them. Everywhere you look, there's just so many. And you can imagine if you're up out the Earth's atmosphere and you're looking, and you see how insignificant you are, compared to everything else around you. So when the Russian astronauts went up and saw this, they had to have counseling afterwards to help them cope with this overwhelming sensation of being insignificant. And that's the truth of the matter, you see. And then if you feel like you're so insignificant, you're not even a speck on a speck in a universe which could be unlimited, then you can imagine how that's going to crush the false ego. False ego is I'm the center of the universe, and really ego is I'm practically nothing. I'm so insignificant it wouldn't make any difference at all if I just ceased to exist at this point. So that creates a lot of insecurity and fear, which is really just the false ego crashing down. So that's truthful. Any other ways that truthful could be described? If a person's very truthful, very humble,
Transparent.
Yeah, well, it says pure, doesn't it? It says pure and truthful, which is interesting. So your level of purity also seems to be proportionate to your level of truthfulness. Because you have four imperfections: tendency to cheat, make mistakes, subject to illusion, and imperfect senses. Imperfect senses, mistakes, illusion, and tendency to cheat. So these are contaminations. As you become purified of those contaminations, then you can start to be really truthful. Otherwise, your truth is overshadowed by your mistakes, illusions, imperfections, and cheating propensity. That will impair your ability to express things truthfully. It's quite scientific, isn't it? Quite technical when you break it down. Any other ways we could say if a person is very truthful, what does that also mean the person is? Compassion. How compassion? Yeah, I'm going to have to process that one through my tiny brain because I haven't looked at it like that. Truthful is compassionate. Yeah, I was thinking of integrity. A person that's truthful has a very high level of integrity. So high level of integrity would mean that the person would consider other people. He would be very sensitive to how other people are being affected, by his actions. So in that sense, that would be also being compassionate, and and that would be determined by how truthful the person was. Again, because also truthful is like having a good understanding of reality and taking into account other people. So then that would open up channels of compassion. You would put yourself in the person's place and experience his truth rather than your truth. Your truth is your perception of what's going on. So you give that up to perceive their perception of what's going on, to try and empathize with that. And then that helps the person not feel alone. And then, of course, then that would be compassionate, yeah. Any other ones for truthful? Sometimes people have this tendency to hide themselves in ignorance, and they don't want to face the truth. So if you're hiding from the truth, so to be truthful would also mean there'd have to be a certain level of fearlessness. You'd have to be quite fearless, to just, I'm going to speak the truth. This may upset you. This may be dangerous for me. I'm just going to speak it anyway. But also in the Bhagavad Gita, it explains that if you speak something which is disturbing or unpleasant to the person, although it may be the truth, but it's not palatable, then you refrain. So just the fact that it's the truth may not be appreciated, So with truthful is consideration and compassion. So that's, I can understand now more how compassion would, it's like saying the scalpel is very, very sharp, but and the truth is very, very sharp, but that scalpel has to be used with compassion, only in a way where it's going to be helpful to the person. If you're just going around being truthful all the time, you're really fat, you're really smelly, then okay, it may be the truth, but the person's not going to appreciate that. So the truth is tempered with compassion so that you don't hurt the person. If you hurt the person by your words, then that kind of overshadows the fact that it was truthful because it wasn't done compassionately. So yeah, I like the compassionate angle actually. Yeah, that's a good one to really take into account. I know there's one devotee and he likes to be very truthful, but he speaks sometimes in a very upsetting way. So compassion would be good there to tone it down, Think about what are your words what kind of effect are your words going to have on the person, even though they are truthful. So just because something is truthful, that isn't sufficient for justifying speaking it. Oh, Krishna. Any other ways you could explain it? What else if a person was very truthful, what are the qualities would he have to do that? Fearless, compassionate, high level of integrity, humble.
Grounded.
Yeah, which is really in touch with reality, isn't it? Not an illusion. And also he would have to be self-controlled because renunciation in the mode of passion is that you don't do something if it's difficult. Whereas a truthful person, he's made a commitment to do something, and then maybe 10 years later, maybe he's got married, and at the time he really did love the woman that he married, but now he doesn't feel like he loves her anymore. And he's thinking, well, and you could say, well, if you're going to be true to your word, you've made this vow, you've made this commitment. How can you step out of that now and shirk responsibility? Mahatma Prabhu, he does a whole series of lectures on vows, and because we're brought up in a culture actually where we say things and we commit to things only because at that time we have the feeling that we want to do it, and later on when our feelings change, we feel justified to say, well, that was 10 years ago, but I don't feel like that anymore. And he was saying that's the culture that we've been brought up in, but the culture in the East is different. When you vow to do something, you give your word to do something, then you don't break that, even at the cost of losing your life. That's how serious it's taken. So vows aren't taken so whimsically. And if we take the vows with a very strong commitment, the vows are much easier to follow than if you just take the vows because at that time you're feeling like doing it. Because there's no guarantee you will be feeling like doing it 10 years from now or 5 years or maybe even just 10 days from now. And he was saying, I'm not sure if they do this in some sampradayas, but that why not every year the devotees take their vows again and again go to the fire sacrifice and just recommit to what they've already committed, just to keep those commitments fresh, to help them understand. Just because you feel this way or you don't feel that way isn't really, can't really be justified. So to be self-controlled, to be determined, and to have another interesting thing about being truthful is you have to have a good understanding of what's going on to be truthful. Otherwise, how will you be able to speak the truth? You can only speak the truth if you've seen the truth. So is your perception of what's going on reality, or is your perception of what's going on affected by your biased? Maybe you see it this way because you had this experience in the past, and therefore that's coloring now your perception of the thing that's going on. And then it's not actually true. And that would mean that there'd need to be some purification and some training, some austerity. Like Brahma didn't see the truth at first, but after performing austerity, he qualified himself, he purified himself to be able to see what the reality was. Yeah.
I have a question regarding the purport.
Oh, okay.
It's just I see this word a lot. I wonder if you could talk about it a little bit. The word akinchana.
Akinchana. Akinchana. Well, Prabhupada explains it nicely in the purport, doesn't he? He says, as expressed in the prayers offered by Queen Kunti, the Lord is akinchana vita. Property of a devotee. Oh, yeah. So he says here, a devotee who has sacrificed everything for the service of Krishna and whose only source of relief is the Lord is known as akinchana. So that's why Krishna doesn't give himself very easily, because once he becomes conquered by the devotee, then he's prepared to serve the devotee and do anything to protect the devotee. So he will only do that when the devotee has proven himself to be worthy of that type of reciprocation. So it's no small thing to become a kinchana. And it's interesting that Mother Yashoda, she conquers Krishna. She's tying up Krishna with ropes, but it's not her strength that conquers Krishna. It's her love that conquers Krishna. So if you want to conquer God, then you have to show him your love, which is kind of counterintuitive, isn't it? You're trying to conquer somebody, and you're going to do it with your love. There's a nice story, Bilvamangala Thakur, he was blind, and this boy kept coming to him and bringing him milk. And then one day he realized it was Krishna. And so when the milk went down, instead of going for the milk, he tried to grab Krishna, but Krishna ran out of his grasp. And Bilvamangala Thakur said, well, you may escape my arms, but you can't escape my heart. So I've got you in my heart, and I'll never let you go. So that's when you've conquered Krishna, when you've brought him into your heart, and you don't forget him, and you don't let him go. Bilvamangala Thakur. Bilvamangala Thakur. He lived for about 700 years. Very special devotee. Lord Chaitanya used to read Krishna Karnamrita, which he wrote. I think it was that one he wrote. Whichever one it was he wrote, Lord Chaitanya used to relish it and read it all the time. So a very special devotee. He was a Manjari in the spiritual world. Jai, any other questions or comments? We can maybe end a little bit early. Okay, ISKCON Guru Vrinda ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Gaura Premanandi Haribol.
His Grace Adhoksaja Krishna Prabhu ki jai.
Gaura Bhakti